Good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining us this evening. Janine and I last week talked about how to plan for a school year that you can't plan for. And tonight we're going to kind of piggyback off of that. And we're going to talk about how to recognize the emotional and mental needs of your kids as you begin this school year that no one could have planned for. And pre-pandemic, stress existed, but now it's even increased.
I think that before the pandemic that we are experiencing right now, our kids had people like teachers or small group leaders or coaches that they could, lean on and build relationships with and have conversations with. And right now, a lot of those relationships are really lacking, and maybe they're not even taking place. I think that as parents, and I'm speaking as a parent, like there are days that I've tried to plan and make sure that everything is taken care of. Only to feel like, if I'm being honest, at the end of the day, there's just so many things that I didn't get to, or it's never seems to be enough. And so, before we start today, I want to just take a deep breath, let you guys know that as parents, like we got this, and that we can still care for our kids really well, even in a season where we feel overwhelmed. We can. And so one thing that I think can make our jobs as parents a little easier is if we have a quick reference for some things just to be aware of or to take note of in the lives of our kids. And also just a quick reference for how we as their parents can respond when we see things in their lives that need some care or attention. And so really that's what we're talking about today.
Yeah, and I really love the fact that we're talking about this. It's a heavy topic, but I think it's an important one. And as your pastors, we've been intentionally learning about how to recognize some warning signs that our kids may be struggling with mentally or emotionally. And today we want to share some tools for having healthy conversations with your kids at home about their thoughts or their feelings as they begin school, and really anytime they may feel overwhelmed or stressed or dealing with any sort of change.
Yeah. So today we are going to not only talk about some things to look for in our kids, but we're also going to give some cues to us as parents, just the ways that we can respond to our children. And I think too, Matt, right now, we want to acknowledge and really just address that we're in a season that is so different, where there's lots of change happening constantly. And then as our kids start school, they're going to be feeling a lot of that more so than they have maybe over the summer. And so there's a lot of tension right now. There's a lot of feelings and thoughts in our own lives as parents and as adults, but also in the lives of our kids. And so today we're going to be talking about some signs for things like anxiety, depression, and then Matt, briefly, I know you're even wanting to touch on suicide. And I think if I'm being just honest, when I read over anxiety, depression, and suicide, even when I was reading over my notes, I thought, whoa, like it feels like a very heavy topic. But I think something that I want to acknowledge today as we dig into this is that, when we look at these three things, we don't have to consider what is the worst case scenario for these three items, right? But we can begin to recognize these signs in our kids, even if we don't think it's an overwhelming characteristic that would describe them, if that makes sense. And so I don't want you to tune out if you think, oh, that doesn't apply to my kid, because maybe there are little pieces of what we're going to talk about today that you'll be able to recognize and have a good conversation about with your child. Through what we've talked about. So we wanted to talk about signs that show up in three different ways in our kids, and those three different ways are in their mind, in their body, and in their relationships. And so when we're talking about things like anxiety or depression, the signs or symptoms, I guess, of those things can show up in the minds of our kids, what they're thinking about, what's consuming their thoughts, and how are they thinking about others and about themselves. The second thing there is their body. How are they taking care of themselves, and are the routines that they are in physically, are they changing, or are they consistent? And then the last thing there is relationships. Are their relationships with others changing, and what is their relationship with us as their parents look like, and what about their close friendships? And so in all of the things that we're going to talk about today, I think all of those characteristics are going to show up in one of those three categories: mind, body, or relationships.
Yeah, and I just want to make this real practical for everyone, and talk about some of the signs you can look for with anxiety, depression, and even suicide. This isn't going to be like an exhaustive list, but these are some of the most common things to watch out for. So just some common signs for anxiety could be a lack of sleep. It could be belly aches or belly pains, frequent headaches. Maybe it's nightmares or sleepwalking, racing thoughts, trouble concentrating, or even fear of relationships ending. So you can see how even that list right there, some of those are related to the mind, some of those are related to the body, some of those are related to relationships. So then kind of moving on to signs of depression, one of the things to note about depression is depression is not sadness. It is a void of emotion. So it's almost like an I don't care type attitude. It's not like this middle school, high school boy, I don't care attitude. It's just this void of emotion. So maybe it's sleeping too much, or maybe you notice hygiene changes in your kids, or a loss or an increase of appetite, or a withdrawal from relationships. So all of those things can point to signs of depression. And then lastly, signs of suicide, which let's be honest, this is probably not something kids are going to deal with as much, but maybe teenagers are thinking about it when change takes place. So just a couple signs of suicide could be giving away possessions, or obviously posting or commenting about suicide. So
yeah. So I know that was a lot, right? That felt like and again, that wasn't an exhaustive list, but it was just a list of a few things that we can be aware of in the lives of our kids when we see those things. Now, it doesn't mean that if we see one of those things that our child is depressed, right? But I think it is important to note that if we're noticing some of these things, that the best thing I think to do next is to approach a conversation at home with our kids. And so some ways that I think we can have just a healthy conversation at home. And really, when I say the word conversation, I don't mean one conversation. I mean an ongoing dialogue just with our kids, which is what us as parents, I think we want, right? We want that dialogue to continue all throughout the lives of our kids. So the first thing that we have here when it comes to having those healthy conversations is being an authentic model for our kids. And I know that for me, sometimes this is hard because I don't want my kids to see the weaknesses in me. I don't want my kids to see the places where I struggle. I don't always want my kids to see those parts of me, right? And I'm not saying that we should let them into every little detail of our lives and our thoughts, but I think that there is some goodness in being able to let our kids see that we aren't perfect and that we have things that we deal with too as parents. So the next thing that I have here is to check in with our kids, but don't make assumptions. And so ask your child a question about how they're doing and don't lead their answer in any way. Just give a simple ask, maybe even allow there to be some silence and just kind of wait for their answer, and don't make any assumptions or try to define how they're feeling for them, because then they'll be using your words instead of trying to find their own. The next thing here is just to keep following up and to be consistent. And this is difficult, right? It's just but again, just continuing that dialogue and keeping that communication regular. I think this is important in good times and in bad times. So what I don't want is to only have these conversations with my kids when I feel like something's wrong, because then every time I have that conversation, it'll be like, okay, Mom, what are you trying to get at now, right? But instead, even when things are fine and you don't think that there's anything urgent to talk about, still have those conversations with them. Some other things that I just wanted to note and talk about with you guys as parents is that we can have all of the right words and approach our kids in the wrong way, and really struggle through like communicating with them. But by the same token, we can not be sure what to say or what to do or how to actually have a conversation about something, but approach it in a way that is good and that is not assumptive, and our approach is what matters more than our words. And so I know that as a parent, there are sometimes I don't know what to tell my kids. I don't know what to say to them. I don't know, you know what I mean? But just being able to go to them and say, hey, I'm not sure how to talk about this, but I want to talk about it with you. And just having that heart of, I'm in this with you, we're in this together, and I want us to communicate, I think is way more important than knowing all the right words to say.
Yeah.
So, last thing, gosh, I feel like I'm talking a lot. I'm going to give you a turn here in just a minute. The last thing I wanted to say in this section, again, just going back to that, our kids should know that we're not perfect and that we are humans too. I think that there's a lot of there's a lot of value in being able to allow our kids to see that struggling with anxiety or depression or whatever it might be, it can be something that we have dealt with too. It can be a mutual sort of experience. And so I want to just give an example before I give it back to you. This past week, my daughter, she was having a hard time making a new friend. And so we have some neighbors that live across the street, and my daughter will sit in our yard and sometimes ride her bike around and kind of watch them play. And she came inside this week and said, Mom, could I maybe go like just introduce myself to them and like say hi? And I was like, yeah, of course you could. Like, of course you can introduce yourself to someone. That's okay, right? And she, rode her bike around the block a few times and then ended up coming back inside and said, Mom, I was just too scared to talk to them. And what I wanted to say was, you can't be scared of people. Like, just say hello. Like, you can just even stand, with your bike on the other side of the sidewalk and just, wave or say hi. But in that moment, I really tried as her parent to address how she was feeling. And I was able to tell her, yeah, there have been times in my life where I felt nervous or I felt scared too. And I feel like when I said that to her and began to talk through it with her, I don't know, it was almost like even just like her body language relaxed a little bit. And she realized like, oh, like this is okay and I can work through this. This doesn't have to, So I think that when we approach our kids in a way that shares with them that we deal with these things too, I think it makes them feel like they can share with us.
Yeah, absolutely. And you might be sitting here tonight wondering, okay, I've heard all the signs to look out for with anxiety, depression, suicide. I've heard we need to start conversation at home and have it be an ongoing conversation, not just this one-time conversation. But you might be thinking to yourself, like, practically, what's next? What are some action steps we could take with our kids or as a family? And so I just want to make this practical for you. Maybe it's teaching your kids some active coping skills. Maybe it's recognizing or challenging negative thoughts, or sharing your worries, or even getting out and being active. Make a plan. Have a system in place for self-harm, or whether it be anxiety, depression, whatever it is. We are here as your pastors. You talk to myself or Pastor Janine. Maybe it's something you don't feel equipped to handle, and you want to talk to us about that. That's okay. And maybe it's something that we're not necessarily equipped to handle, and that you need to refer your kids to a counselor, and that's fine too. And then lastly, help your kids identify who can be a safe place for them to talk to. Maybe sit down with them together and identify a few specific people together. Let them recommend who those people should be, and then discuss that, what that looks like.
Yeah, I think those are all really good ideas. So that is all that we really have as far as talking to our kids about the way that they're feeling and the way that they're thinking right now. But in closing, we just wanted to really just express the reason why this conversation was important to us. And, what I would love our families to understand about Matt and I is that we truly care about your families and your kids. And I know that as your pastors, we feel that you as parents are not just able, but that you are called, and you have the ability to really guide your kids through things like this. And so we hope that today what we've extended is just some awareness to topics that aren't always easy to talk through, but that as parents, you are helping your kids to navigate. And so as we begin a new school year, and some of our kids I think have already started, right? School started like yesterday. We really want to partner with you guys to support you in the great work that you're already doing in raising your kids. So we want to see your kids succeed and thrive every day, just like you do. And so we love you guys. All right. Well, I'm going to pray for our families as we end today. And once again, just thank you for being a part of this with us. So let's pray. Lord, I thank you so much for every family here at Maiden Lane. God, I think about all of our kids and all of our students. I think about how much we've missed being together with them in this space, but God, how thankful I am for the connections that you have grown, God, in our families over this time. God, for the ways that we've been able to reach out and to spend time together. God, I pray that as our kids are heading back to school, God, and there's lots of change, lots of things are different. God, I pray that you would be with our kids in a way that is so tangible to them, so real to them, God. Lord, that they would lean on you and allow you to help them navigate through this time for them. And God, I pray for our parents. God, I pray that you give them wisdom, God, guidance as they love and care for their kids. God, for us as parents, I think that raising our kids is some of the most important work we will ever do. And God, I thank you that you are the one who leads us through that important job. So Lord, I thank you, I love you, and I pray that our families would be so blessed today and in this season of their lives, God. Amen.